Say what you was just saying about these Jewish and white folks. What are they doing on this? They having what?
All right, let me say it like this then. I was up in Tel Aviv, and it's a little area where the Jews be. This is where they live.
Yeah.
They close down on the Shabbat. They close their streets down and all that type of stuff.
Right.
Now I'm up there, and I went to a store, to one of their Jewish stores.
Yeah.
So I went to buy a little something, and the man in the store, he think I got something in my pocket. It's like the Friday movie.
Right.
Like niggas in the store, like niggas is here.
Yeah.
Check them. He thought he went crazy on me. He get the hollering, get the screaming. He got something in his pocket, this and that. So one thing I did do, me as a black Hebrew Israelite, so I got on up, picked up the stick.
Right.
15 of these Jew boys, they cut out running. These are the sorriest people. They just put us down. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
They only put us down. They trying not to get us back up.
Yeah.
Because they know if we get back up,
can't beat us physically.
Man.
But explain what you're saying. They be having meetings about us.
Yeah.
Because they know we waking up.
Yeah, like the Jews are what are all black. On the Shabbats, I didn't actually been in one of their meetings, and they do have meetings about the black people, on how they should treat a black person where he don't think he is up here, where he don't think he's somewhere else. They have meetings where let's keep a black person that's slaves. Let's keep him so he can believe that he that slave. When he can't come to our meetings and talk to us. Let's keep him as that slave.
Right,
I done been to the meeting once. I done been to the meeting.
That's powerful.
And I actually talked about it in the meeting. I asked the Jew dude, why do you hate the black people like this? I told him from my experience, I said, I know the black people come from Africa, come from Africa. I said, I know y'all white boys come from, the cold spots
Caucasus Mountains
of this world.
Yeah.
The coldest spots.
Eat them.
Yeah, man.
Caucasus Mountains.
And I told him in Israel, I said, and Israel ain't even one of the coldest spots. Israel one of the heatest spots in the world.
Right.
So I'm asking them, what are y'all doing here?
This ain't your home.
What are y'all doing here? I know why we here. Hey.
Not only that, he looks like an angel. But this blue angel doesn't convince everyone.
Giovanni.
Arguments have raged for decades about his importance and significance. Giovanni Gardini is a local religious historian and writer.
Dei primi secoli è un'immagine che è completamente assente e qui per Ravenna la cosa che viene messa forse più in evidenza di tutte è la gloria. Sono sempre scene che mostrano la potenza del Cristo, la grazia, la benedizione del Cristo, quindi scene più positive.
But what about this bloke up here, the blue angel? The devil?
No.
It's the devil?
No.
I can see him.
Allora,
he has the goats.
Sì, qualcuno ha visto il diavolo in quest'angelo azzurro, ma io credo che più genericamente si possa parlare appunto dell'angelo della notte, di questo, è la notte, il colore appunto del male in questo senso, ma racconta più le tenebre, in senso molto generico.
This argument about the blue angel encapsulates a big problem with the devil in early Christian art. There's no clarity about his image because there's no clarity about his role.
You understand? That's when that Christmas celebration started. We could go all the way back to Daniel 10, but that back then is different. When the white man celebrated it in the 1600s, it was because of the conquering of our people. All right? When you read it, that's what the verse is saying. Read it again.
And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another.
So they start sending gifts to one another, and they start making merry, Merry Christmas. Why? Read on.
Because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth.
Because at one point in time, we tormented them. After 193 AD, when we conquered Rome, that ushered into the dark ages, and we started ruling over them, and we conquered them, and we tormented them. All right, so that's what happens. So after they get back into power, they say, let's make merry and give gifts one to another, because these two prophets, they had us in slavery for a minute. You understand? So let's do this celebration, and that's where that come from. You understand? And that's why they teach their kids, listen, Black Pete gonna come for you and take you to Spain, because that was our headquarters where we was at, ruling from Spain. All right, so
only in very recent times have medical scientists identified the hormonal secretion of the pineal gland. It was isolated in 1968 and became known as melatonin, which simply means night worker from the Greek melos, black, and tostos, labor. Because people with a high melatonin output react strongly to sunlight, which affects their mental capacity.
See, this is the interesting stuff for me here. You know, this aspect of it is definitely something that we need to look at, you know, a little closer. It's kind of overlooked, isn't it, in the alternative field? Yeah,
it is. Isn't it? Because by virtue of this, they are night operatives, and melatonin is called it's called the hormone of darkness, being produced only at night or in the dark. As you know, one of their beloved symbols is the owl. Bear that in mind. So exposure to an excess of natural light makes the pineal gland smaller, and lessens spiritual awareness,
Yeah.
Whereas darkness and high pineal, remember we're talking about inversions?
Yeah,
What
indeed.
greater inversion? So I have to finish it before we even get into the digressions, right? So exposure to an excess of natural light makes the pineal gland smaller and lessens spiritual awareness. Whereas darkness and high pineal activity enhance the keen intuitive knowledge of the subtle mind, while reducing the stress factor. And melatonin is manufactured by the pineal gland through an activated chemical messenger called serotonin. Melatonin also enhances and boosts the body's immune system, and those with high pineal secretions are less likely to develop cancerous diseases. High melatonin production heightens energy, stamina, and physical tolerance levels, and is directly related to sleep patterns. Now we maybe have a grasp on why these princes of light love their light.
Gosh, this is some deep information you're uncovering here. Definitely.
Now we understand why they call themselves illuminists and why they manipulate, because they're not only just robbing you of your what he forgot to mention, by the way, is that melatonin and serotonin are the hormone of independence.
Okay, tell me more.
When the cop shines the light in your face, it, as Gardner's pointing out here, the melatonin. Imagine melatonin flowing from the pineal is like a river. The moment that bright sunlight is shone on it, or any kind of strong light, that river dries up. And since it's the hormone of independence, that means that your independence is lowered, just like your immune system is lowered. So is your sense of independence.
I see.
Yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir, what can I do for you? And you're shaking like a leaf. They use the light because that will reduce your sense of rebellion and indignancy. And they can then, the famous Humphrey Bogart scenes where they got all the lights on, the guys are grilling the hell out of him, right? Getting the confession and so on.
Right.
That's knowledge. That's knowledge. They're shining the light on you. So in our superlit, fluorescent existence, why people are walking around like zombies can be understood. You don't even need to bring anything to do with occultism into it at all. You're in an occult circle. You're in a city, a cetus, coming from the Latin word meaning the womb.
Really?
Yeah, hall. City hall is phallus. Phallus. Hall is an abbreviation of phallus.
Right.
City is the female circle, the civic circle, which is why you have circles and towers, circles and clocks, circles and obelisks. They're moving us around on a checkerboard. We don't even have the faintest idea what's going on. These people have us completely under the hex. And they know how light works, and that we also become addicted to it. Because once your natural hormones are shrunk into a state of complete desiccation, you're more likely to then have to rely, like a druggie, right? You're now addicted to the external form of the light, or the external stimulation. Because you have your inner stimulation, your inner imagination, your inner intuition, your right brain, and probably even your damn immune system, let alone your bioenergetics, is running at an all-time low. It's in the minus zone. And then what do? We got TV. We got America's, we got Hollywood.
You give up everything and become an abomination just for fame and fortune. And we call them the elite. Elite what? Poop eaters?
Oh, no, you got to come in hard. That's why that guy, Travion's dad, he sacrificed his son. Now, some of y'all don't understand that. And the reason it made so much headlines because he's a Freemasonry, and he's a part of that brotherhood, and he's going to get all the attention in the world. So all the brotherhoods wants to see him. This is his time to shine. So all the brotherhoods get to say, who's this guy getting ready to come up in the lodge? What better way to promote him than him offering his son? And they already know what it was. Oh, okay, he's going to be coming up pretty soon. So they don't have to announce it to the public, but whatever field he was in or wherever he's working, they're going to take him under their thumb. He's going to rise up. He's going to be of wealth. It's a reason for everything. And that guy sacrificed his son, man. That's why I don't speak on it a lot, because we know that's a sacrifice. Zimmerman is just playing the part. Pretty soon this thing going to be over and done with. You never hear about him again. As I said before, there's levels of rituals. Okay? The more wealth that you have, the more rituals of sacrifices you're going to be asked to do. 98% of hip hop is gay. There's no other way to say it. 98% of them are gay. 2% of them got out. That's not many, because the majority of them love that lifestyle. Okay. All actors and actresses sleep with the same sex for roles, contracts, commercials, sitcoms, and that's the truth. Whenever you see an actor or actress and you see all these commercials they putting out, and every time you look up you're in some type of movie, that comes at a price, man. They don't do this stuff. People say, well, that's just their talent. See, that's a young man talking. He's a dumbass. He ain't been nowhere. The industry does nothing for free, y'all. Once you are in, they prefer you not to hang around nobody you know. Why? Because people that's not in the industry can see BS. They can see demonic things happening. They don't want you around folks like that because they can influence you to get out or not participate. So usually they pick your girlfriends, they pick your boyfriends. Why? See, you never can understand. You got all that kind of money, and you can date about anybody. I mean, half the time I go to the mall, make them celebrity women look sad. But why come they don't want those celebrities messing with anybody in the mall? Because those women in the mall are regular people. Some of them people believe in the Lord, and they read their Bible on a regular. So that means they got light in them. They can't have that. So when you get ready to date somebody, they prefer you to date someone in the industry because they wicked.
By this time, the communist champions of the Negro race had hidden the revolutionary ideas and slogans for a Soviet Negro Republic behind the humanitarian banners of jobs, security, civil rights, and peace. These humanistic issues were to provide the friction necessary to divide the American people and lay the groundwork for revolution.
I am Leonard Patterson. When I was a young man, only 23 years old, I joined the Communist Party. I was a member of the National Executive Committee of the American Young Communist League. In 1930, I was the official communist candidate for election to New York State Assembly. I knew Gus Hall and other top-ranking American communists very well because I trained with them at the Lenin University in Moscow. I joined the party because I honestly thought the communists were trying to help American Negroes. I broke away from the party when it became clear to me what the communists were really up to was to use the Negro people in this country as cannon fodder in a violent and bloody revolution aimed at the establishment of the American Soviet dictatorship. It was that simple, and it is still that simple today. Make no mistake about it. What is happening in the United States right now under the banner of civil rights is exactly what has happened in China, in Cuba, in Algeria, and many other places around the world.
I'm Julia Brown. For 9 years, I was a member of the Communist Party, serving as an undercover agent for the FBI. During that time, I learned that the communist conspiracy had been planning and working for years to bring violent revolution to America. It was to be a communist revolution, but the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize that until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights. Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. They knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people. Their strategy simply has been to keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure, to open all wounds that have long since healed, and deliberately to create new ones wherever they can.
Now, he act like a good nigga for the white folks. But I tell you, I don't want to even be around no more good niggas. I'm with them good Negroes. That's what they call Rodriguez, a good Negro. I want to be with the bad niggas, because I know what's happening with the bad niggas. That's where I want to be. I want to be with the niggas. I want to be with the bad niggas that don't want to ride on the back of the bus no more. And this is what Elder Davis will call you. The bad niggas is not going to work for $18 or $20. No, I want to be for the bad niggas who going to register and vote. I want to be for the bad niggas going to swim on any God's beach where water is flowing. I want to be
Lyndon Johnson is the biggest nigger lover in the United States.
Amen.
He may think that he can use his Justice Department with Bobby Kennedy at the head of it, and he may think that he can use J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI and the Army to force us white people here in St. Augustine and other parts of the nation to mix up with niggers. But if he sends troops in here and puts a bayonet behind every one of us, we still will not mix up with a bunch of black savages.
I'd like to say, in a real sense, not fellow freedom fighters, but fellow slaves. For we all are slaves, not only in this society, not only in this community, but all over this nation and all over the world. What you're doing here is very significant and it's very important.
Then you follow up your friends and acquaintances and ask them if they want to help put this fight over to save this country from the onslaught of integration. You know the system is they want to throw white children and colored children into the melting pot of integration, throughout of which will come a conglomerated, mulatto, mongrel class of people. Both races will be destroyed in such a movement. I, for one, under God, will die before I'll yield 1 inch to that kind of a movement.
But not only has the black man got a champion, they call him Martin Luther
so the seeds of dissension were sown among both the black and the white races. And inexorably, the people of the United States were being divided according to plan. Among the so-called downtrodden and oppressed, among the supposedly starving and pauperized Negroes, the enemy was referred to as Whitey, Mr. Charlie, the Man, and the Ophé. Phase 1 was well on its way. Now it was time to implement Phase 2. Create the appearance of popular support. Beguile the people of the United States and the world into believing the pious fraud that the civil rights uprising, led by a handful of agitators, was a popular movement of the whole Negro race in the United States.
Now, this doesn't mean that there isn't a legitimate need for the advancement of civil rights for many of our Negro citizens. Of course, there is a need there. Otherwise, communist agitators posing as civil rights leaders could never hope to enlist massive support for their schemes. The aspirations of Negroes for full equality were not created by communists, but they are used by communists in such a way that idealistic Americans of all races can be tricked into implementing the communist blueprint for revolution. Having been on the inside of the Communist Party, it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it's hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be a communist maneuver.
Racism is a wonderful institution that should be rejuvenated and inculcated in schools. It is the last barrier to global homogenization and represents the default position of 99% of humanity over 99% of historical time. A natural and indeed necessary sentiment, racism is just one method for people to evaluate others in accord with their genetic value. Without racism, the world would today be dominated by Neanderthals, or by the class of people who mostly inhabit sub-Saharan Africa. Civilization requires the leadership of society's best people. Those areas governed by less advanced demographics fall quickly into barbarism, as we see in so many places. In normal times, racism is so universally experienced that historians hardly bother to call attention to it. It's only in diseased and perverted eras like our own that elites rail against this ineradicable and precious human attribute.
Immigration. Now, people really do get this party wrong every time on this issue, don't they? We don't think immigrants are animals, for God's sake. I know a lot of immigrants personally, and they're perfectly nice people. They're black, of course, which is a shame. But honestly, some of them can do some jobs almost as well as white people, and we acknowledge this. Now, a lot of immigrants are Indians and Pakistanis, for instance, and I like curry. I do. But now that we've got the recipe, is there really any need for them to stay? Conservatives understand these problems, you see. Like we understand young criminals, another very emotive issue. This party feels that we've been just a little too soft on these bastards.
Now you only hate Jews and homosexuals, but if we were in a different forum and they were not here, you would be sitting there talking about how much you hate black people. Now, they making you back down and getting you a little scared?
No, that's not true because...
Okay. What's that?
You see, we see eye to eye with the Nation of Islam
And the main people that have caused everyone the problem is the Jews. If the blacks could be separate and the whites could be separate,
That's right.
and the Orientals could be separate, we
right.
have no problems.
Racial
with
survival.
Race
That's the key.
mix according to the Bible.
So segregation is the way. Okay.
That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
According to the Most High.
So the question is, well, you know, are you opposed to integration? But this is the wrong question. The question is simply, can you use integration as a weapon, as a weapon? And this is the point, is that, yes, you know, you can see all these beneficial aspects to it, and that's how it's sold. That's how it's given. It's sort of like the acceptance of transvestites and gay people. I mean, but
leave her alone.
That isn't how the oligarch who's setting up these social structures is thinking. He's not thinking benefit. What he's thinking is how I can shatter what exists. And so in this instance, it's a weapon. And that's really the transition that people have to make, is from understanding it just as a beneficial social construct to something that can actually be used to damage.
To keep the hate alive. A lot of blacks will be watching this, just pouring anger over the supposed murder of their leader. How obvious can it be for those that are awake? Again, this is nothing but a hoax.
I must say they are a handsome and healthy and pretty happy-looking bunch of children.
Yeah, no kidding, they look happy, because they know their dad is still alive and well. I'm not saying Martin Luther King is still alive today, but he definitely did not die on April 4th, 1968.
And Yogi especially. I imagine that she must have been a real consolation at the time of the tragedy.
Yes, she was, Mike. She was really so much of a consolation to me because of the way she accepted this. With so much understanding and so much courage, and it was so reassuring to me. And she said to me, "Mommy, I'm not going to cry because my dad is not dead. He may be dead physically."
My dad is not dead. They're even mocking the viewers with this. Give me a break.
And one day, I'm going to see him again. And she said, "Mommy, you are such a brave and strong lady. I don't know what I'd do if I were in your shoes. Mommy, should I hate the man who killed my dad in?" And I said, "No, darling, Daddy wouldn't want you to do that." And of course, I also said to her, "You are so brave, and I'm so proud of you." And I put my arms around her. And of course, she didn't cry very.
And of course, she didn't cry very much. Wow, how people, they buy these news stories. If it's in the news, it must be true. This woman here, not a good actress. You cannot fake real. A lot of people watch this over the years, and they hear it in the news, oh, it must be real. Why would they lie about this? It's the divide and conquer method, keeping us all fighting, and it keeps the eyes off those that rule this world. Order out of chaos. That's how they do it. They want the whites fighting the blacks, the rich versus poor, men versus women, Democrats versus Republicans, Christian versus Muslim. Again, it's simply the divide and conquer method.
We thought we should ask, what shall we call it in English? You can translate the Hebrew words, as I said, Mossad's Institute, but when they write a letter to their friends in the CIA or the British intelligence, what do they call themselves? It took a while. It was a matter of asking the Prime Minister's spokesman. The best you could do, because officially the Mossad is under the Prime Minister's office. And I think he sort of wondered why you want to know and all that, so we explained. And he came up with the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. I mean, if it were to have initials, it would be ISIS. Just simple words like that. Interestingly enough, kind of a British model. The British don't really like the names MI5 and MI6 for their foreign service. They prefer SIS.
It would more be like a dirty way of saying "let's have sex."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what they were chanting together, hundreds or thousands of them.
And it's difficult to sort of wrap one's thoughts around this. I mean, it's it's so crazy, and it's so different from European mentality. It really is.
This is also what we as nationalists has warned of for so many years, and I'm always sad that we are like prophets, knowing what is going to happen. But I mean, if we have a large enough concentration of these people, some things will happen. I mean, our countries, our Europe will be more and more and more like the Middle East or North Africa or whatever. This is how it will be, and the only way, and this is the problem, the only way to keep this without everything falling apart is with a more suppressive government. I mean, you can do one of two things. Either you throw them out, you deport them, you do these things, you close the borders and have a homogeneous Europe, or you have a dictatorship, probably the most ruthless the world has ever seen. These are the only way to contain this situation, and it seems that they are going on number two and not number one in this. Race matters. Race matters a lot, and they have tried to make us question even the existence of race in Europe, and especially in Sweden. And when you think that everybody is alike, and you do, then you're not prepared, and that is the big problem for Europe.
I mean, this is the misconception with, like, let's say, Western governments and Syria, at least on the official level. We know that there's much more going on behind the scenes there, but we stand, the Western world and say, oh my God, this leader he's suppressing his people. He's, wicked. He's having it's a human rights issue in terms of how they deal with their prisoners, etc. But it's like, these people know that they have to rule with a hard, with a fierce attitude and a hard fist, basically, clenched fist. Otherwise, if they don't, this is what has historically happened in these countries, and we just don't get that. People in the West don't get that.
And that's why, as Jonas frequently says, and this is important, that is why we have seen the wars from the US, Israel, EU in those parts of the country. That is why they got rid of Saddam Hussein. That is why they got rid of Muammar Gaddafi. That is why they tried to get rid of Assad, because those people could rule these people. And now, we can see what is happening. It's interesting to see that the geographic area that ISIS is working in, their caliphate, as they call it, it's more or less the same area as Eretz Israel, Greater Israel.
Greater Israel, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, that could be a coincidence, of course. It could be, but as Roosevelt said, nothing happens in politics by coincidence. And I beg to agree with him in that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Exactly. There are references in I guess it's the Old Testament, where, what area they are, that is divinely given to them, right? And so this is being fulfilled right now. Because look at it. I mean, who wants to stay in these areas now? If they can go to the West, and if they can have, get new iPhones and selfie sticks, and what's the incentive to go back, right?
No, and I mean the poor guys in ISIS, when everything is done, when the Christians are left and all these refugees, so-called, has left, okay, then you maybe have a couple of thousand or 100,000, I don't know, ISIS soldiers. And I mean, it's no problem for Israel, the US, and whatever, to crush them in a couple of weeks if they want to.
Yeah.
So someone is waiting on something to happen before they crush ISIS.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've been saying that all along, that, certainly Israel could have gone in and wiped these people out. And they're normally so, paranoid that it is really amazing that they haven't. I think France could have done it. I think certainly the UK could have done it. And definitely the US could have done it a long time ago. But they've let these people.
Well, I mean, incompetence is not a valid excuse in this case when it comes to military might and if they wanted to. I mean, so
they are given that position by the Vatican, and for generations the Knights of Malta have governed even Russia. I mean, that's the truth. They really govern Russia, and they govern Israel, and all nations across the earth, but ultimately they are subordinate to the Jesuit general, and they also are servants of the British Empire.
And so it begins. The Crusades enter into Turkey and the Middle East. Battles go on. but aren't there far fewer than you thought there might be? And here we go. The last battles are fought, and that is the end of the Crusades. So now then we can talk about some facts. Yes, there were Crusades, but notice they ended centuries ago, and jihad is being practiced today. Jihad has been with us for 1,400 years. There is no comparison between jihad and the Crusades, certainly not a moral comparison. And when you're looking at the Crusades, remember, in one sense, all of the Crusades were defensive wars. Why? Well, as we saw on the first jihad map, it was Islam that came out of Arabia and conquered the Middle East, a Christian Middle East. And so the Crusaders were trying to free their Christian brothers and sisters from jihad. So there's no moral comparison at all. The motivation of the Crusaders was to free Christians. The purpose of jihad is to enslave the kafir.
The Lion of Judah, but Judah is not the Jews. Whether they are brainwashed to believe it, that's neither here nor there, or whether anybody else believes it. Well, they've just been reading from the books that have been presented to you by these very, oligarchs. This aristocracy has been commissioning all of this history. What we're talking about here is alternative history that really goes to explain what's going on.
So when you look at the Gospels, in order to have produced that literature, you needed a tremendous understanding of Jewish scripture. This is where it comes from. It comes from the Jews that had these financial relationships with the Caesars, were making a lot of money on the relationship, and were secular. They obviously did not ascribe to the theologic vision that the people who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls did. So the Roman Empire, the Roman effort to control Judaism goes all the way back to Julius Caesar, who appointed the high priests. So at the very onset of the Roman control of Judea, they tried to interject Rome into the Jewish religion so that the authority structure would be pro-Roman, and then they could thereby keep the country pacified and keep it as a tax-producing region.
I see. Well, doctor, say, make this. I sleep 3 days in hospital because this is a problem.
What was the problem?
Problem here.
Problem there?
Exactly. Balls, it's very big. Like this. It's big. Really. He said make sex with anyone or make anything.
The so-called discovery of the New World, the greatest event in the history of that period would be really the Africans and the Arabs, collectively called Moors, would lose their hold on Spain and be pushed out. Be pushed out of Spain, and they would lose the Mediterranean. They had blocked Europe in the Mediterranean. They had forced Europe out of the Mediterranean, and they had forced Europe into the Middle Ages. Now Europe had discovered longitude and latitude. It had come out of its box. They'd gone back to sea. They had learned some maritime techniques from the school at Salamanca, that the Africans had translated information from Spain, and they would turn on the very Africans who translated it for them and the very Arabs. The fight between the Africans and the Arabs would facilitate the rise of Europe. But except had the Africans and the Arabs got together at this point in history, fighting over various interpretations of Islam, they could have stopped Europe and stopped the slave trade, but instead of stopping the slave trade, the Arabs went into the slave trade, disgraced Islam, disgraced themselves, and left the African without protection, something which we should never forgive.
the British colonial empire, our allies, the colonies, our allies, the nigger with the fez on. Every time we were attacked by the cracker, the niggas that worked with the crackers wore fezes. Here they is. Here they is. Here's the niggas that work with the crackers, wearing the fez. We didn't tell these niggas to go put them hats on. Look at this low-life nigga with a fez on, with the crackers, like he got the British kilt on. These is when you can recognize the British, the French, the English, all of them African Uncle Toms, they wore the fez.
It was an alarming possibility. Yet the picture wasn't entirely gloomy. There were signs that the neglect of ancient skills had been noticed and was beginning to be reversed. What was unexpected was where this was happening. In Shoreditch, in the East End of London, a new school had been set up, inspired by Professor Keith Critchlow's pioneering work at the Royal College of Art. Its remit was to teach and foster the knowledge and skills of traditional Islamic and Eastern arts. If the location for this enterprise was surprising, equally so was the identity of its founder and supporter, the future head of the Church of England, the Prince of Wales.
When I saw the flower, all these parts were actually there. Yes. So,
Then it's a quick, yes, I see. One of the reasons I was so keen to find a way of achieving this school was because I felt there was such a terrible danger of losing all the precious wisdom and the knowledge and understanding of where so many of the great traditional crafts and forms of art had come from, and architecture indeed. And we were in real danger of losing these very precious understandings.
The girls that worked for me, and I'm going to be clear, they were prostitutes.
Right.
I only sent them on one occasion in 1994
right.
to the Bullingdon Club.
Right.
I'd sat down with Christopher Coleridge, George Osborne, and William Sinclair, who's the father of my son, who had described the kind of girls they wanted me to send.
Right.
And I was A, to supply the girls, and B, to supply the cocaine.
Right.
I sat with all three of them, George, William, Christopher, and discussed what kind of type of girls, how much drugs they wanted, and they described what kind of girls they wanted, i.e. this Naomi Campbell lookalike.
Right.
What they meant was they didn't want anyone fat.
Right.
They wanted tall, slim.
Right.
And I think in those days, Naomi Campbell was somebody that the only black girl that
she was a goddess.
Absolutely, and I think if they could have had Naomi, they would have done. But clearly they couldn't. So,
right.
But my girls were pretty good looking, and
yes.
And I sent 3 girls that, came close.
'Tis a villain, ma'am, I do not love to look on.
But as 'tis, we cannot miss him. He does make our fire, fetches in our wood, and serves in offices that profit us.
But ho! Slave! Caliban! Thou earth, thou, speak!
There's wood enough within!
Come forth, I say!
I must eat my dinner.
There's other business for thee! Come thou, tortoise, when?
Oh, the poisonous slave got by the devil himself upon thy wicked dam.
Come forth!
This wicked Jew as heir, my mother, brushed with raven's feather from unwholesome fen, drop on you both. Southwest blow on ye and blister you all over.
For this, be sure tonight thou shalt have cramps, side stitches that shall pen thy breath up. Urchins shall work all exercise on thee. Thou shalt be pinched as thick as honeycomb, each pinch more stinging than bees at Maydom.
This island is mine! Thy cigarettes, my mother, which thou takest from me. When thou camest first, thou strokest me and made much of me. Wouldst give me water with berries in it, and teach me how to name the bigger light, and how the less that burn by day and night. And then I loved thee, and showed thee all the qualities of the isle, the fresh springs, brine beds, barren place and fertile. Cursed be I that did so. All the charms of cigarettes, toads, beetles, rats, lack on you. For I am all the subjects that you have, which first was mine own king. Here you stye me in this hard rock, whilst you do keep from me the rest of the island.
Thou most lying slave, whom stripes may move not kindness, I have used thee with humane care, lodged thee in mine own cell, till thou didst seek to violate the honor of my child.
Would it had been done, thou didst prevent me, had peopled else this isle with Caliban.
Horrid slave, which any print of goodness will not take. I pitied thee, took pains to make thee speak.
You taught me language, and my profit on 'tis I know how to curse the red plague. Rage you for learning me your language.
Take thee hence! Fetch us in fuel. Shrugs thou malice. If thou neglects or dost unwillingly what I command, I'll rack thee with old cramps, fill all thy bones with aches, make thee roar, that beasts shall tremble at thy din.
No, pray thee. I must obey. Your art is of such power.
So, slave, hence.
Where is that salt coming from? If the earth is covered, if 70-80% of the surface is covered with water, where's that salt coming from?
Right.
How did it get there?
Well, you
Nobody
know,
asked these questions.
and with that question, where did with that, idea or issue, where did the story of fossil fuels originate?
Again, that was John D. Rockefeller and there was a conference in Geneva, Switzerland in 1892. And he had lobbied this was a scientific conference, and they were to discuss how they were going to classify oil. And he had lobbied with them, probably through major contributions, to have it listed as a fossil fuel, so that scarcity, meaning that it's only produced in limited amounts, it's based on decaying biomatter.
And what's the poor oil company? I think back east, isn't it in New Jersey, that's going to use the dinosaur for their logo? I mean, they're screwed now. Once this gets out,
that was actually an Oklahoma company called Sinclair Oil.
I thought it. Yeah, I was just going to say Cinco. So
even then, I didn't get an answer, and so I wrote into the internet, the Holocaust didn't exist, and I gave all the examples what I have done to find it out. And nothing happened. Now already 2.5 months. So I am quite convinced now, and tell it to everybody, that this biggest crime didn't happen because there was no place where it took place. So it's quite simple that now everybody who has been charged or even put into prison because he had denied the Holocaust, and there are hundreds in Germany that had to suffer such a punishment, that now they all must be, how is it, wiederherstellend? They must be spoken free from the revision. Revision, yes, they must get a revision that they have not done any wrong, and that they only spoke the truth.
This is the most terrible thing I've ever seen. Precisely because of the deliberation with which it was done, and the total absence of even any kind of sympathy.
Duranty's articles in the New York Times sharply contradicted Muggeridge's reports. Duranty went out of his way to dismiss them as bunk or sheer absurdity. During the deliberate famine of 1932 to 1933, more than 7 million Ukrainians perished when Stalin seized their entire grain crop for export. Still, in a March 1933 article, Duranty insisted there is no actual starvation or deaths from starvation, but there is widespread mortality from diseases due to malnutrition.
That was when his reporting was particularly disgraceful, because he denied that there was any famine. And we used to wonder whether, in fact, the authorities hadn't got some kind of hold over him, because he so utterly played their game. But it didn't worry the New York Times, who featured his reports.
Ultimately, the cover-up of Stalin's crimes helped the communist regime gain diplomatic recognition from the United States. William F. Jasper is a senior editor for the New American Magazine.
The Soviet Union, like every communist country, was an economic basket case. It could not produce enough to survive. And so every communist socialist state has been dependent upon aid from the capitalist producing states. So Russia was desperate for our aid, both in terms of direct government aid, but also in terms of opening up the spigots for the private capital markets, particularly New York bankers and corporations, to move into Russia in a big way.
In 1933, the Roosevelt administration invited a Soviet representative to Washington to negotiate terms of diplomatic recognition. For his news correspondence during the previous year, Duranty would receive the Pulitzer Prize.
What is there to assimilate to? What is there about contemporary German?
So you don't believe in integration?
Well, no, that's not the point. I'm saying you have to have something to integrate with. In other words, German culture or Danish culture or Dutch culture has to be sufficiently confident that immigrants want to be a part of it. If you go to an English school, English Muslims are told that Britain was the font of imperialism, of racism, of colonialism, of everything bad in the world. And then they're surprised that British Muslims are turning up in Afghanistan fighting for the Taliban. Why would you love your own country if you're told it's the source of evil in the world?
But all this, Mark Stein, raises the question, why isn't the European culture strong enough to defend this?
Because I think since the Second World War and even since the First World War, European elites have not believed in themselves or their own people. I think European elites drew the wrong conclusion at the end of the Second World War. When they said never again on the German death camps, they didn't really mean never again to standing up to intolerance, and they drew the wrong conclusion. They thought it meant rejecting nationalism, rejecting national identity, rejecting your cultural inheritance. And there's a huge hole in the heart of where European identity ought to be.
But you don't see any signs of this going to be changed?
Well, I see hope. I see signs of pushback, but I think the kind of pushback you're seeing with France banning the burqa or Switzerland banning minarets, I think in a sense puts Europe on a course for very profound bicultural clashes over the next few years that I think are going to be very uncomfortable.
And that might even deepen the conflict.
Yes, I think you're right. You're absolutely right there. I think the conflict is going to get worse before it gets better.
Mark Stein.
They have technologies which they wish to keep to themselves. And there are many technologies being advanced in Israel and in laboratories which are under the control of the Jews. But I have no evidence that they are suppressing better theories than Einstein's theories deliberately and foisting Einstein's theories upon us in order to keep us primitive and backwards. But it's interesting to note that the protocols of the learned elders of Zion said that what you're implying would take place. And I think they gave Darwinism as an example in the protocols. They did do that to the Germans. They did try to prevent the Germans from developing nuclear weapons. And then when we had developed the A-bomb in America, it was Jewish spies who gave that technology to the Soviets, which has hurt us ever since.
While Europe was busily engaged in internal strife in the early 17th century, bands of seasoned pirates from North Africa used this opportunity to set sail under an Islamic flag on a long voyage into the North Atlantic. Sailing past the coasts of Western Europe, they headed for the islands of Ireland, the Faroese, and Iceland.
This is the extreme point reached in the Islamic expansion into Europe.
Attacking and pillaging unsuspecting communities, the raiders made off with anything of value, as well as taking prisoners whom they sold into slavery and demanded high ransom for their release.
Big Brother has made it so chaotic, so they've been able to not only desensitize and depersonalize people, but they've given us so much trauma, and basically the core trust that we had, the trust in the police, the trust in authority, the trust in government, the trust in one another. You see, all of these things have been eroded. People don't have the fundamental faith anymore in anything. And that's what they want. They want you to be so afloat without any belief in anything, or that your belief is so eroded. And then they know that they will have two kinds of reactions. They'll have an extreme fundamentalism on one side, where people realizing that the world is, losing these threads. Then they become hardened and fixed. And that's why you see a revert to Islamism, and you find a reversion to evangelism, or even to extreme conservatism or what have you. That's one series of reactions where people become more conservative and fixed in a very bad way. And on the other side, there'll be complete breakdown. People will just give up. Taking away those core threads and disempowering people, you have a complete meltdown on the other side. And so
Plato related that the priest of Isis relayed to the poet Solon the ancestry of the Aryan race. H.P. Blavatsky was given the secret doctrine by the masters of wisdom through telepathy, otherwise known as automatic writing. This is all based on the notion that Atlantis had 7 root races. The secret doctrine maintains that 7 races originated in Atlantis and that one of the 7 were the Aryans. Although there were supposedly 6 other Atlantean races, Blavatsky tells us that the Aryans were the master race or supermen of the Atlantean races. She writes, "They did not become supermen by ordinary evolution or mutation. They took a quantum leap upward in order to give them the necessary faculties to live in the post-Diluvian world. While losing some qualities that were coveted, such as magical powers over the forces of nature and psychic development, they gained faculties of brain development and superior intelligence over the other surviving races, who were supposedly inferior in blood stock and mental faculties." According to Blavatsky, Manu, one of the last of the god-men, escorted the Aryan race out of Atlantis because the Aryan race had the capability to evolve into god-men. There are varying beliefs about who the Aryans really are.
A great flood wiped these beings off the face of the earth. But before they could all be destroyed, certain priests escaped by boat. These escaped priests, believed by mystics to be the original race of Aryan godmen, who were said to be the ancestors of all Indian and European people, descended from the super beings of Atlantis, and that they had lost their powers by mating with mere mortals. The Nordic race did not evolve, but came directly down from heaven to settle on the Atlantic continent. Ancient immigrants from Atlantis had founded a great civilization
in the high Himalayas. Here, survivors of the last cosmic catastrophe took shelter. This is the true cradle of the Aryan race.
It's always been thought that civilization started in either Mesopotamia, now in Iraq, or in the Indus Valley, now in India and Pakistan. But legends speak of an even earlier kingdom called Arata. Here, barely 30 kilometers south of Giraffe, where the valley is at its widest, destitute local people had unearthed the most valuable cups and vases. The motifs etched in the soft stone were not just outstanding examples of skill, they also offered a sudden solution to a mystery that had long baffled scholars. Professor Majidzadeh was well aware that fragments of objects with similar designs had been found throughout the ancient world. 1,000 kilometers distant in Mesopotamia, in Oman on the Arabian Peninsula, along the banks of the Indus, even as far away as Afghanistan. The professor knew that their source was an enigma. The sheer number recovered in this valley and their similarity allowed the professor to solve the riddle. The pieces had to have come from here, at Jiroft.
But God said, I know what he knows not. He's going to go off, but what he does, I'm going to allow that evil to manifest something good and beneficial to life itself. So even though millions of lives may have been lost in the process of getting a better knowledge of self, something better was produced that can prolong life. So the loss of life in acquiring knowledge is justifiable. Ooh. Ooh. And all white folks, they're scared to death of you. That's right, that's right. It's really fear. We don't like these black folks. Why you don't like them? Because, good God, if we turn them loose, we won't exist anymore. That's why we don't want them messing around with our women. Because if they get our woman, there ain't no more of us. One drop of them cats' blood, and they changed the thing up. Hell, we even come in the black neighborhood and get a black woman, and we can't make a white child even though it's our seed. She fixes my seed up till it's like them. You just powerful. They're afraid of you. Genetically, biologically, you're really superior. And that you should know. But in terms of guidance, you are inferior. And that's only for a season and for a definite reason. Now let's move on quickly.
So if we look at the cephalic index of the world, you can clearly see that this is the place where the Swiss come from. Here. Mongolians, Genghis Khan. And they got their little concentration here in the middle of Europe, in the Alps. From a place called also Khazaria, the Khazars. This is where the Khazars went to in the middle of our beautiful Europe and destroying it bit by bit. And when I translate Khazar in demotic pharaonic, there's Ka, the living soul, and Sa, a king or pharaoh. So Khazar means soul king. Well, these black dudes will like that, who think that the pharaohs were black, the soul kings. Meaning that these royal bloodline of pharaoh is there. Their souls of kings are there. And they went to Switzerland, the base of all evil, where the Khazars went to, and the Mongolians, and who are in fact of pharaonic origin. I mean, how could the Mongolians organize anyway? They never with Genghis Khan in such a way, you know, that they're completely incapable by themselves to organize in such a way Genghis Khan did. So they must have had another brain behind it, you know, and that's pharaonic. And they also went to different places in the world, like Khazaria and Mongolia. So this is concerning the skulls, and this is very scientific. This is where the Swiss come from. This is why they don't want to belong to the European community. And I tell you, they rule over the European community with their Templars. So the skull formed because they mixed with the Mongolians, the Swiss did, concerning the craniometry. I mean, it's there. These are solid proofs, eh? They're very, very solid. This is where they come from. This is where they came from. This is the original Swaziland. They're not European. It's a cancer, a black cancer. You can see that, a black cancer in the middle of our Europe, bringing 2 world wars, a 30-year war, killing everybody, etc., etc. And I tell you, I know how they are. They are no Europeans. I've never experienced something alike. So here again in Wikipedia about craniometry here. If I scroll down, this is quite interesting. Some of you racists might like this, but I tell you, it's wrong. So here it talks about the Jews and brachycephalic. So, yeah. So the only ones having the same skulls are the Jews. So the Swiss, in fact, have Jew skulls of the brachycephalic order. Now, how come the Swiss and the Jews share the same cephalometry? Whereas the Swiss have always terrorized and chased the Jews, forcing them to live in the 2 villages of Endingen and Lengnau, which I've already shown you in my other video, right at the German border, only forcing them to wear the yellow Jew hat in the Middle Ages and other Nazi-like Swiss measures. Well, why? Well, this is the pharaonic link.
Before you die, let me show you the things I have done, so you understand the breadth of my transformation. This is me at the Grand Canyon. Do you see? This is me at Mount Rushmore. Do you see? Do you see?
Yes, I see!
Here I am at the Alamo in San Antonio. This was just outside of the gift shop. Do you see?
And my friends, this testimony will be shared with you in just a few moments. Ms. Defarge. They're waiting.
Very well, Etienne.
She really told you?
Of course.
Was it clear?
Like crystal.
And precise?
I can see no other interpretation, Etienne.
I see, Mr. Defarge.
Etienne?
Ms. Defarge.
Have you ever tried to imagine the other world?
Everything all right?
Well, have you?
I'm afraid not.
Keep doubting, Etienne.